about to start and have a conversation about the universe and all its complications. Step right in, we've been waiting for you to say that you're confuddled. Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Yeah, we've been waiting for you, waiting for you.
Are you confused? Are you muddled? Well, you've come to the right place. You're listening to Confuddled, the podcast where we talk philosophy, we talk the deep and meaningful, we think the big thoughts and ask the big questions.
We're your host. I'm Azul.
And I'm Alex.
Here's how it works. Every week we have a new topic, but only this week's host knows what it is. This week I'm the host, and Alex has no idea what we're going to talk about.
No, I have no idea.
Do you want to take a guess?
I'm pretty excited because this is our first episode.
This is our first episode.
And I'm very excited that at last we're finally here. We're recording it, and I can't wait to hear what the topic is.
Well, okay, I'll just go straight at it then.
Okay.
Today we're going to talk about burials.
Burials?
Yes.
Rather morbid.
Quite a bit of a morbid start,
yeah.
I'd have to admit, yes.
But you know, on the flip side, the Romans used to have a skeleton, or at least a replica of a skeleton, I think, when they used to have their banquets and parties, because that would remind them how fragile and precious life is, and then they'd party even more and be able to enjoy it more because they realise how precious it is.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and it's also a feature in Buddhism, where to meditate on impermanence and death, and
right,
it makes life
fair.
that much more rich and meaningful.
I wonder if that had anything to do with where the phrase memento mori came about.
Yeah, remember to die, or no,
remember
to die?
you will die.
Remember you will
Yeah,
die. And
yeah.
my Latin is very rusty.
I do not know Latin, so there you go. I just know this is the meaning of this sentence at least. So
Okay.
that could be something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So burials. Have you heard of a guy called Frederick Bauer?
No. Who's that? It
Well-
rings a bell though, I think.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, I might do.
I had no idea who he was until, like a few days ago, to be honest. He's the guy who created the Pringles can.
Yeah, no idea who he is.
Yeah, like, you know what Pringles are, though, right?
Are you saying that Pringles are like the snack burials?
What?
Because the guy who made Pringles, so this has to do with burial, right? So the guy who made Pringles.
We'll get to burials soon enough.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
Frederick Bauer was the guy who created, from what I know, he's the guy who patented the method of putting the chips into the Pringles can.
But it's just putting crisps into a can. What's the patent?
I mean, I couldn't find much information about it, but from the looks of it, he was quite famous because of it.
Of putting crisps in a can?
He also could have had to do with, I mean, he also...
Is it the sealing technology?
Well, let's go with that.
We're not sponsored by Pringles.
No,
just
we're
to
not.
let you know.
He also,
please, if you can sponsor us.
he definitely created a few other things. I think he also created a few frying oils.
Okay.
And so he must have patents for those things.
I imagine so. That makes sense, but not, I guess, okay. Well, I guess moving along.
You must be wondering, well, how we get to burials from here.
Yeah, how do you get from Pringles to burials?
So he died. I mean, obviously, he's long dead.
Was he put in a Pringle can?
He was put in a Pringle can, yes.
Seriously?
His cremated remains were put into a Pringle can and then buried.
What flavour was it? Okay, never mind.
I clearly need to do more research.
If it was cremated, was it barbecue flavoured? I'm so sorry. Shouldn't
Rest
make
in
fun of
peace,
the dead.
Frederick Bauer.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Yeah, he's legitimately buried in Springfield Township, I think, where he was born, in New Jersey, and he has. In his last will, he stated that he wanted a part of his remains or his full remains to be buried in a Pringle can, and what his children did was, because they wanted to have a bit of him with themselves as well, they essentially took a few of his cremated remains and put it in a Pringles can and then buried it and kept the rest of it with them in like a pot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so he actually is buried in a Pringles can.
I was not kidding.
And it's an original. Does it look different, the original Pringles cans?
No, I'm pretty sure they're identical to what they look like now. It's just, he was, I know it's hard to wrap your head around, but he was quite literally just buried in a Pringles can.
Just imagining some person burrowing underground, escaping from prison or something, and then they suddenly they accidentally go through the graveyard, and then they come across a Pringles can. They're like, oh, great, some sustenance.
I mean, Oh God, I don't want to see the ending of that story.
No, I'm really morbid today.
Well, it's actually interesting
Monday,
because
so
that is true. It's a terrible Monday.
Morbid
but
Monday.
Morbid. Oh, I like that. I like that very much. So yeah, he was buried in a Pringles can, but and this kind of made me quite curious and to see what kind of other burials were out there. So I looked into the weirdest burials in human history, I suppose, and came across quite a few interesting things. Like, I'm sure you've heard of Jeremy Bentham.
No.
He's the guy who coined utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism?
Yes.
What is that?
Okay, let's. Have you heard of the phrase "for the greater good"? Or
yes,
that is utilitarianism.
Okay, so that's like using something for a greater.
Well,
good, is it?
It's the idea that, for example, if you had to make a decision about something, then you would make sure that your decision is based on providing the greatest good for the greatest portion of humanity.
Okay.
So a good way of understanding this is, have you heard of the trolley problem?
No. I mean, they do have tricky wheels at the supermarket.
Yeah. Oh yes, they quite a few problems from those tricky wheels.
I'm always tempted to sit in it and ride.
You know, I really want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, after this, let's do that.
Yeah, totally.
Great.
I mean,
let's go steal the trolley.
It's only say at 8:00.
Yeah, in the evening, and I'm sure they would. It's still open until 10:00 here. So.
Yeah, and the trolleys are waiting for us to ride.
Great. Okay, I'm excited. Let's get this over
Fair
and done
enough.
with.
Yes. So the trolley. I'm sure you've heard of this. If not, then you'll understand. You'll understand as I go on. But it's the idea that it's a thought experiment, right? You are a conductor or a train repairman, somebody near a train line.
Okay.
And there is a train coming quite fast in no position to stop.
Yeah.
In no position to stop, and on the train track are 5 individuals tied onto the train tracks.
Okay.
And you're next to a lever that would change the train to go onto another track, right?
Oh, okay.
And on this other track, there's one human being.
No. I was going to respect them at first. Oh, that sounds like a cool concept. What a cool thing to coin, like utilitarianism. But then,
yeah.
Now it's the dark side has showed itself.
Yeah. A lot of people hated utilitarianism, and I mean, a lot of people still think that it's terrible. A lot of Kantists, like Kantians, I suppose, whoever follows Kant, or Buddhists, like.
Well, they can or they can't.
Yeah. I swear to God, that joke's been made so many times and it's still funny.
I'm sure it has. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of people dislike the idea of utilitarianism because it's the whole idea where you don't really look at the deeper meaning of things. You just decide the greater good. So it could be the greater good for the worst amount of people as long as the worst amount of people are the majority, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So theoretically, if to take a horrendous example, if Germans outnumbered the Jewish individuals during World War II, utilitarianism would state that as long as you're increasing the happiness for the greater population.
Right. And that's where it falls apart. That's where it can get ethically wrong, and it can really, morality's questioned a lot in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, obviously this is quite a high level reading of it, and there are more nuances and stuff like that to look into it. But anyways, he coined utilitarianism, and he also had quite an interesting request for how he should be, quote unquote, buried. He asked a group of his friends to essentially
deep fry him.
No, but I'm pretty sure somebody must have done something like that.
I'm sure it's happened.
What, out of curiosity, what would you want to do when you die?
Well, I originally want to be cremated, I think, but then I know that's bad for the environment. So I'd probably just be buried normally somewhere. There's a spot I like. Actually, I've already picked a spot I would like to be buried at, and it's a sacred place, and it's next to a forest, and it's really beautiful and peaceful there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I thought that'd be a cool place to be buried. Yeah, and also, actually, I wouldn't want to be cremated, or if I were to be cremated, I want my organs donated to be of use when I die.
That makes sense. That is a good.
I sure don't need them.
Yeah, I honestly believe everyone should, by default, be an organ donor, but. That's a bit of
that's another.
That's a bit of
That's another thing for people, I guess.
unorthodox opinion, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know, but okay, carry on.
So he instructed his friends to essentially wait until his body had decomposed, so you would only have a skeleton, and then put him in a wooden closet, a cabinet, and dress him up in his clothes, and then pad his clothes with hay, and essentially name this cabinet the Auto Icon and present it in the middle of a museum or something like that. I think it's kept currently at the University College in London.
Why does he want to do that?
I genuinely have no idea.
That sounds nuts.
To this day, he is currently in a cabinet in hay in a...
Why?
That's what he wanted.
What would you want? Would you want to do that?
No, I don't think I would want to be put in a cabinet for everybody to see.
No?
No. That just sounds weird.
That just sounds so bizarre. Now I've actually he's lost some, credence, I think, after hearing about that, because now he just sounds nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but you come across quite a number of weird stories like this. There was this other guy, Hunter S. Thompson. He was a gonzo journalist, I'm sure. You may have heard of him as being...
No, I'm terribly ignorant. I've been living in a cave.
That is fair. He's one of those... He died recently, I think, and he was quite a close friend of someone you would know named Johnny Depp.
Oh, okay.
And what Johnny Depp did, or what Hunter S. Thompson asked Johnny Depp to do, is put his ashes into a cannon and fire it.
Oh, no, I know of someone actually here in New Zealand who did that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. There you go.
It's illegal, but it was done.
I think it was illegal there as well.
This person was really lived life to the full and was a real,
Yeah.
And so, but they still, it's sort of like in honor of him to, break the rules of it. They did that.
Well, there you have it, yeah. And so it comes to be that there are a weird number of ways where people have requested how they want to die. This one comic book author asked to be converted into ink so that he could be written into one of his comics and then preserved that way.
That's really cool.
I
can understand. Cool. At least I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Andrei Tchaikovsky, or I'm pretty sure I'm butchering the name. I think it's Tchaikovsky, yeah. He donated his whole skeleton to science and specifically asked that his skull be sent to the Royal Shakespeare Company to be used as a prop.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That is such a cool idea.
Right. And unfortunately, it wasn't used until recently in 2008 when David Tennant used the skull in what I imagine to be Hamlet, but I can't recall exactly what he played.
I'd be really creeped out if I were holding a real skull.
There was some controversy there because they told everybody that it was a replica of a skull, but that it turned out to be the real skull, and so everybody was kind of creeped out.
Where are the hand wipes?
Yeah. I don't even know if the actors knew. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. So, how would you want to be buried then?
I don't know. I did actually quite a while ago want to be just normally buried.
Yeah.
And then I began to think that that's quite boring and abnormally boring even.
Now the question is that, hearing all these crazy burial or interesting burials, is what is it about us as humans that we're dead? It shouldn't matter, right? Why do we want to be preserved in that way? Why do you think we want to do these crazy things?
I have a theory, and I think I may be at least partially correct, but I want to hear what you think as well.
Okay.
Why do you think we have such an obsession about how we're going to be buried? I mean, we have wills for purposes of monetary legislature, right? We give money to our children and so on. But there are so many wills detailing how we want to be buried and for how long and so on and so forth. It's weird when you think about it.
It's really weird. I think the reason why we want to do this is because, I think firstly is that we identify with our bodies. So we think of them as us. Whereas, a number of different, for example, religious traditions, so, they teach that you don't identify with your body, it's just a vessel. But we seem to, I think because we identify with our bodies so strongly, that it's like a way of preserving ourselves and a way of almost like, because death is scary in terms of the complete end of our existence. Is scary, and if you identify with your body as as what is your existence, then you're going to want to do something that will help ensure that you continue in some way, or that you are remembered, and that somehow you're immortal, almost, that you're remembered in such a way, or at least maybe not quite immortal, but there's like longevity to your memory.
That's actually interesting, and I totally agree with that, because for most of my life as well, I did subscribe to the idea that if you're not remembered after you die, it's like you never existed. It's quite a troubling thought, to be honest, and it kind of like just looking at the literature of looking back at classical literature, you can come across many poets like John Keats and so on, who always mention that idea about how they could achieve like a semblance of eternity or a semblance of immortality through their artwork, right?
Yeah.
Because their artwork was what maintained their legacy, shall we say. And so it comes down to this idea that everybody is afraid of death, as you said, and so everybody wants to maintain some semblance of their existence through something, and I think that's why cryogenics is such a big thing. Like,
yeah, that freaks me out.
I honestly, it's a good time as any. That's how I want to be buried, I guess.
Okay.
Cryogenics. I
mean, that would freak me out, but okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't want to. I guess it's a normal human emotion, but I feel like I want to live longer. So if there is a chance of living longer through cryogenics, then I'm going to take it. I mean, I have nothing to lose. If I die, it's dead.
Well, see, I'm the opposite. I wouldn't want to live longer than I have. I think that would be boring.
Oh, you are not the only one who said this to me. Most of my close friends believe in this.
Yes, I think we had a discussion about it once, didn't we?
I don't know why.
Yeah, like I would not want to be, like a power would not want to have his immortality.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would take it without a second thought, to be honest.
But I guess the thing is, I do believe in a soul, and I do believe, well, I guess effectively, I guess I believe I'm already immortal. So I guess,
right.
I guess maybe we sort of agree in a weird way, but I don't believe it has anything to do with my body, Right. Well, I believe I'm more than my body in that sense. That's why I'm not so bothered. When I die, I guess.
Well, okay. Let's put a spanner in this. Actually,
okay.
I could compromise with regards to my beliefs. I could allow for my body to die and decay as long as my consciousness remained.
Right. So I guess the question is what is us? Who are we?
Yeah, and that's a topic for another episode, perhaps.
Yeah, probably. That's a huge topic in itself.
Yeah,
who are we? That's what motivates people's actions with regard to their, what they want for, and what their desires for, what they want when they want to be buried, because their definition of who they are influences what they, that action, in the sense that if they believe they are the body, or they believe they identify as a certain thing, like a writer, or like a comic book writer, like you mentioned as well, then they want to be preserved in that way because that is them, and they don't want the death of that. And it's weird that death just scares us. The end of us is scary.
It's interesting because what you just mentioned earlier reminded me of something. There is a old Buddhist folklore about this man who wanted to be remembered as being such a unique individual and like renowned as being this adventurer, this guy who was out there and doing new things. And so he thought for years and years about how he wanted to be buried and where and so on and so forth. And so he finally figured out that this obscure forest and this obscure location and this obscure part of wherever it was, and he traveled there for a year or something, and finally at his deathbed he was happy that he was going to be buried here because at this point he was old and dying anyways. And he happened upon a priest who had achieved a level of enlightenment, shall we say. And he explained the story to the priest, and the priest smiled and said that he was wrong, and in fact multitudes of eons earlier, there were hundreds of people buried in this exact same forest in the exact same way that he was buried.
Oh, wow.
And so there was nothing special about him. And so I don't know why I remembered that, but it's quite.
What's the saying? Death makes equals of us all? Or was the
Yeah,
was the saying,
yeah.
death
That
makes,
is death makes equals of us all. Yeah.
Is that, I feel like that's wrong.
It's good enough.
It's good enough. Let's change it.
Yeah.
Let's make it that.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said before, about the fact that we're going to be forgotten. That's a scary thought.
Terrifying.
But I think for me, that means that, at least for the next, I'd like to live a life to the full that at least I will enjoy, because I know it's limited. I only have a very short time, so I want to live it to the full and do everything, that I want to do. And but I also want that to impact others in a positive way. And that means when I die, then at least I know I've influenced people's lives. And I guess it's the question of meaning. There's so much ties into this.
Yeah.
It's a question of meaning. Like, did my life mean anything? Did it mean something to other people? And yes, they will die, and then I'll be forgotten someday.
Yeah.
But at least that small little moment where I was alive, something happened, and it was good, and it was meaningful.
And it was your decision and your
it was my
choice.
decision, yeah.
And that leads to, coincidentally, my theory about why I think people are so obsessed about how they're buried and so on. It actually, I didn't plan this, but it actually links to the origin of this episode where we mentioned about Latin and the Romans and memento mori. Memento mori is, as we mentioned before, remember you will die. It's this idea that regardless of how you live, you have to die. That is, as you said, Alex, the equalizer, the great equalizer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But human beings are innately incapable of relinquishing control of their lives. We all want to be in control of our lives, and we all want to make sure that we live our lives to the fullest. We live our lives how we want to live it, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps, and this is just a theory, but perhaps the reason why we want to have complete control over how we are buried is it's almost like that last middle finger towards death. This is how I want to go.
Yeah.
Like, this is the very least control I can have over something that I know I can't control.
Yeah. And that's weird. Why do we want to control things so much? Because we aren't in control.
No, we're not.
I mean, at best, what we do is have a relationship with life, and then we interact with it. But then we're not in control of it.
Yeah, and it kind of, I feel like it's almost like a reaction. When you think about that you're such a small being in the grand scheme of things, the first, at least for me, when I think of myself as being a speck in the universe, the very least I would want is to have control over my life.
Yeah.
Because that's all we have. Well, like, what we don't have is significant in the grand scheme of things. So, like, regardless of what religion we subscribe to, like, regardless of anything, there are billions of people and billions of people before us, and whether there's afterlife or not, existence comes to a certain point of meaninglessness. If you're an atheist, it's completely meaningless. But if you're a Christian or some other major religion, then at least there is some life after death, shall we say. But even then, this has not stopped people from wanting to control that death. So it's almost like people have a over-familiarity with their life as we know it in this plane of existence. And yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned religion, because a lot of religion, particularly in the Eastern tradition, is all about relinquishing attachment.
Yeah.
And identifying with who you really are, which is not the body. And also with it also trying to teach people with regard to relinquishing attachment to not want to control their lives.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I actually take the opposite opinion of you when you said we're a tiny little speck in a vast universe, and you said the least you'd want to do is to have some control over your life.
Right.
I would say, because I'm a tiny speck in this vast, organised, seemingly organised, amazing universe, I would not want to be in control of my life. I'm so tiny.
Oh,
and
that's
this is a
brilliant.
vast thing. Why would I dare to be in control?
Wow. Yeah. No. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Actually, I genuinely haven't thought about it in that way. That's I'm speechless. It's like a leaf in the wind, right? Just see where life takes you.
Yeah, that's like that thing you're quoting the Iliad there, was it?
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Greek epic, the Iliad. Oh, very, very poetic of you.
Oh, thank you.
I think there was a line. There's something like maybe there's a scholar who's listening. Hopefully someone's listening. But I think there's a line there saying how our lives are like leaves in the wind, and that they fall and they die and they're taken off, and then there's a new generation that grows on on the trees, these new leaves, and then they fall and die, and then a new generation comes. And I was describing human life like that. It's very the Iliad is a really great work of dealing with human life and existence. They were incredible. Yeah.
Would you mentioned that Eastern religions believe in the division of body and soul. Was that?
It's a little more complicated than that, and depending on which
fair.
tradition.
Yep,
but
yep.
Broadly speaking, they're trying to, their aim is to relinquish attachment. For example, in Hinduism and in yoga, they identify you're not this body, you're not this individual I, you're the great self. You're Atman, you're one with Brahma. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but you're part of this great self.
Right. I think that's interesting because in my research that showed as well. If you look in the Western world, most of the time burials and that kind of thing were quite attempting to maintain some kind of presence after death. But then you have Eastern burial practices where you have people being buried inside trees, cannibalism, and other things where it's less about preserving you as you are and allowing you to move on to the next stage of whatever it is.
That's interesting you say that, because in the West, our Western mindset's very individualistic. Like, it's very we're very focused on the individual and the power of the individual and the rights of the individual, whereas in the East it's more relinquishing that individuality, and it's in terms of its spiritual traditions, and I think culturally, from the little I know,
for the greater good,
possibly. But for example, in Tibet, there's something called sky burial, and I know.
Oh yeah.
So what they do, sky burial, what it is that when you die, you get taken up to, I think it's somewhere pretty high up. There's lots of vultures around there, and then your body gets hacked to pieces and you get fed to vultures. And you might think, okay, on initial reaction, okay, that's not cool, I don't like that, I don't want to go like that. The reason behind it is that Buddhism is all about, benefiting other sentient beings. So sky burial is seen as a way that your body, even when you die, is benefiting another being, which is, the vultures, and it's part of the natural order of things. Going back to what we were talking about before, about the eye, is in Buddhism there's a whole thing called anatman, so non-self. So in Buddhism the whole question is that actually we don't know who we are. You can't pin yourself down. Like, there is, like, who is this I? And that Buddhism is based on this whole question that actually there's no independent self that you can pin down. It's a complete mystery, and it might not even exist. We can't. It's just nothing you can pin down at all. Because of that, they're a bit more relaxed about death. Who is it that dies?
Yeah, I see.
Who is it that dies?
No, that's totally fair. It brings to question all these things about who we are really, like, and what we even value. Like in the case of the comic book writer, I think he was a Marvel comic book writer, if I recall correctly. He wanted to be a comic book. As funny as that is, that's where his meaning in life, really, his legacy. He wanted to be his legacy.
I bet he was a page turner.
Wow.
Yeah, guys, you're gonna have to get used to my wonderful jokes.
Yeah,
very dry jokes.
Lovely.
Yeah. So let's conclude. Let's wrap up.
By all means.
So, what have you taken away from this? And this is, I've got to say, this is a fantastic topic, burials. Because it brings to light all these other questions, right? About meaning and about life and about who we are. So it's a very good philosophical question.
Yeah, I did not expect this to go in the ways that it went, but honestly, it's been great. And I think, all in all, in terms of what I can conclude, it's like people are weird. Like, this is people are weird, and it's amazing that we're weird, and we try and we tribulate, and it's, death is just another paving stone of us trying to take control of our lives. And apparently there's something called sky burials.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
I think the whole question of contemplating burials and brings to mind, like I said, these great philosophical questions. Who is it that dies? Who am I?
Yeah.
And also, I think practically what I can take away from this into my daily life now is that life is really fragile and really precious. I'm but a small speck in this vast universe. And I know people are getting depressed a bit just hearing me say this, but I only have a flash of, it's like a flash of lightning in my life,
Right.
the vast eternity of things. So it's very precious. So that makes everything in my life so precious and so meaningful because it's only here for a short time. So I'll savor every moment and savor every interaction and other people. Everything that's here is so impermanent and precious. So then that fills it with meaning in and of itself. And I also think that it's really important that we talk about this. And in the West, where it's a bit taboo, but in the East, it's not. Death is very normal. And I think the more we talk about this, the more comfortable we are with death, and also it brings to mind these great questions that will lead us to, I think, greater joy and peace, because these questions are really important for us to ask, which is why we do this podcast.
Yeah, honestly, it's death has always been a taboo subject where we live, at least, and I imagine in the Western world in general it is a taboo subject, and I would say for the most part the Eastern world as well. Perhaps not for people who are somewhat more spiritual or religious, but in the general day-to-day sense you don't talk about death, and I think that's bad. Like, death is a part of our lives, and I think it needs to be put out in the open and removed of any stigma and any fear. The sooner we're okay with it, the better, the more fulfilling lives we'll live, to be honest.
You're right. Completely right. And I think that's a good note to end on. I think one good practice maybe people could do is just every morning you wake up, remember you're going to die.
Memento mori.
Memento mori. That's the message for this podcast then. Memento mori.
I love it.
Hey guys, that's us for another episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope we gave you a smile and something to think about.
If you like this episode, please give us a rating on Apple.
Every 5-star rating goes a long way to help us keep going and reach more people. We really appreciate all your support.
You can find us on Facebook as Confuddled Podcast.
On Twitter at Confuddled_pod. That's CONFUDDLED_POD.
And on Instagram at Confuddled_podcast. Or just email us at confuddledpodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from you. Share your comments, queries, ideas, suggestions, lightbulb moments.
And your deepest, darkest secrets.
Maybe not.
So get in touch.
Okay, until next week.
We've been waiting for